It's time to open up this week's mailbag on the NFL six-pack. Joe Burrow, can he go full Carson Palmer on the Cincinnati Bengals? And let's check in on the rookie class midseason. A whole lot more on today's NFL six-pack.
This is Locked On's NFL six-pack. 6 bold takes from 2 guys who just flat out know football. NFL experts Matt Williamson and Brian Peacock bring pure NFL talk. Great takes, no fluff. Just honest football talk. Crack one open. It's NFL Six-Pack on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the NFL Six-Pack. Brian Peacock and Matt Williamson with you. Welcome. If you did not know about the new format, here we are. It's the same Peacock. It's the same Williamson. But we took the six-pack that we used to do on Thursdays and just kind of expanded it throughout the whole week. So a new format, new logo, new color scheme. Welcome to the NFL six-pack, and it is our weekly mailbag episode. And I urge everyone that's listening to subscribe to the podcast. And we're here with you every day. It's like we do on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And appreciate all of our everydayers showing up for us and giving us some feedback on the new format as well, and getting in your mailbag questions, which we're going to hit today. And we're going to try to hit a mailbag often during the week as well, not just in the pure mailbag weekly episode. So hit us up at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, in the YouTube comments. Of course, subscribe while you're there. And today's mailbag episode is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Prize Picks app. And today, all you got to do is use code LOCKEDONNFL for new Prize Picks users. And you get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup at Prize Picks. We got my Prize Picks mug here going on today as well. So that was I didn't even plan that one out. It just happened to work out that way. Things are going well here on the new format and the new NFL six-pack. And we did have, I want to start it off by just kind of going down memory lane for a second. And for those people who don't follow us regularly or Peacock and Williamson listeners, and we're Locked On NFL listeners before that, and Williamson podcast listeners for decades, and if they're with us still with the NFL six-pack here, I want to talk about how we got together, because we were asked last week actually, and wanted to save it for our new updated restart here with the NFL six-pack format. How did we get together? How did we start making podcasts together, Matt? And you're one of the OGs of the Locked On Podcast Network, and for you and I, it goes back a couple of formats to the Locked On NFL show.
Yeah. So I was with ESPN for 10 years and hosted a very successful podcast, but people didn't know what podcasts were at the time. Football Today. And I was a co-host over that entire stretch, and we did really, really well. And frankly, it's one of it had nothing to do with me, but if they would have known how to monetize podcasts back then, I would be a lot wealthier and whatnot, right? Yeah.
It was the ESPN's NFL podcast.
It was the one, right? Yeah.
Figure out, and it wasn't at a point in time at that point. What was the first year of that show?
Ooh, 20 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, mid-2000s, right?
Yeah. I mean, because I know there was a fight that ESPN radio's like, I don't want to deal with podcasts. ESPN.com's like, I don't want to deal with podcasts.
Dude, so don't get me started with the radio industry not understanding how the internet works, and that this podcast thing wasn't going away. How can the radio executives look at Blockbuster Video and then watch Netflix come along and be like, oh, but that's not going to happen to the radio industry. Nobody's going to want to have their own specific content with them wherever they go. They're just going to tune the dial in their car forever, and whatever AM pops up is what they're going to get. That's what they thought. And they didn't look at. I was imploring. I was working at a radio station. I was like, dude, give me the password to the website. This is ridiculous. I was writing like fantasy blurbs at the time for RotoWire. And I was like, dude, give me let me do blurbs for the local teams on the website. This website you guys have is terrible. I had to teach my instructor in college. This is around that same time. I had to teach the class what podcasting was, because my old broadcasting, 60-something-year-old professor didn't know what it was. And it was just like, it was crazy. And it was just,
we should have been partners then.
Exactly. It was so obviously going to burgeon and be huge. And I was in on it early. You were in on it even earlier at ESPN and still couldn't figure it out. But we got to figure it out now here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And shout out to David Locke, who was the guy that figured out, daily content for every single team is where this thing is going to go as far as podcasting and sports goes. And so you were in on the 2016 season, the original host of Locked On NFL. And that was when we were audio only. There was no video, no YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
You were all by yourself.
I was all by myself. And it was the only. So David had a very successful podcast, Locked On Jazz. And then that expanded all through the NBA because he's smart. And then said, well, maybe we should get involved with NFL. And when I was let go from ESPN, he quickly reached out to me and be like, you're a successful podcast host. Do you want to be the first host of any football podcast we have? We're going to call it Locked On NFL. And I said, yes, and we had no following, and it didn't, you make money off of downloads, and we didn't have much at the beginning, but now many years later, I'm not responsible, but I had a helping hand of the NFL side of the Locked On network. I was the first guy, Yep.
And I jumped on January 2017 doing Locked On 49ers. Mm-hmm. And at some point we just got kind of, the listeners mightn't be shocked. Matt and I have never met in person.
Never. We talk every day. Yeah.
We talk 5 days a week here, and we have for years. We've never met in person. I was going to go to the Niners-Steelers game last year. Didn't end up going to Pittsburgh, so we didn't get a chance to meet up then. We've not been able to do. I had a kid right around the same time, right after I started hosting the show, so that kept me from traveling a lot once I started doing the podcasting thing. And so I've been home a lot over the course of the last 7 years because I need to be around to work every day at home. I could work from other places, but being a dad, and it's kind of like, okay, I'm gonna go all in on this podcasting thing. And so I left my radio gig, and it's been great, and I love it, and I love doing 2 podcasts every single day here on the network. And by the way, if you guys don't know and had nobody figured it out, Locked On is called it because David Locke, and he did Locked On Jazz by himself, and that's the Locked On network, and recruited his friends, did the NBA side, NFL side. So I've been doing this since January 2017. You've been doing it since 2016, and then we got linked up because
I needed a co-host bad. I
needed a co-host. Yeah. But before that, we did the first Locked On NFL Draft special.
Yeah.
And I was like the host, and you were the analyst for that. And it was a 2-man show. It's expanded to a 4-man show with everybody involved. And it was a really fun process to put that all together. And they needed someone with some production skills so they could host and produce the thing. And so I was brought in to pair with you. And at that point, for the next football season, you were like, I need a co-host. And so I don't know how these conversations went, but essentially David's like, well, who could be your co-host? And you said, well, it's fun with Peacock doing the draft show, and he could do all the production stuff. So maybe that's a fit. And it ended up working out great.
And it did, and then so you and I have hosted a version of Locked On NFL, Peacock and Williamson, and now the NFL 6-pack.
That's right.
Basically have had the same conversations every step of the way. Right.
Reinvention of the same show. And you ask, why would we not just be still doing the Locked On NFL podcast? Well, they believed in our ability to forge ahead with a new show, and they wanted to do some other things and have the Locked On NFL show be more like Locked On NBA. That's changed a lot, as well as the industry changes and the network changes. But they believed in our ability to be like, well, if 2 people on this network can create another new podcast out of nowhere, and we can go do some other things with Locked On NFL and use the power that's already been built, and we're going to lean on these guys to do it. And so that's where we're at. But I kind of like the 6-pack format. I'm having fun with it so far this week. So I want to hear from our listeners and let us know. And we always get a ton of great questions here, but we got to open up this 6-pack of mailbag questions on today's show and start getting through this. I think this one could be somewhat quick, but we had a question about Joe Burrow, and if at some point he's going to become the next Carson Palmer, because things obviously aren't going good for the Cincinnati Bengals. We have big questions about their team builds. Sharp Sports says, with the Cincinnati Bengals unable to provide offensive line protection and competent defense around Joe Burrow, when do you think we will see Joe be asked to be traded, much like Carson Palmer did in 2011? And I just want to say before anything else that Joe Burrow wanted money spent on his receivers too. It wasn't like Joe Burrow's like, yeah, you know what? We could probably let Higgins walk. Let's start paying some defensive guys or whatever. So I think Joe Burrow has much more part in how the Bengals are currently constructed than Carson Palmer did.
Oh, I do too. But I have floated this out there for well over a year, just because the nature of the Bengals organization reminds me so much of the Pittsburgh Pirates, where it's very set in their ways. They're going to make money no matter what. And I think Burrow is totally bought in, and he is an Ohio guy, and I think he takes great pride of being the guy on the billboards, and I'm going to take this franchise as far as I possibly can. But I also know, like all these guys, he's ultra competitive, but I think he also stands out from the pack in terms of wanting to win and doing anything to win or putting his body in harm's way, that he might feel like he's bashing his head against the wall before long and be like, this team doesn't give me an equal footing to win as the Ravens, who I got to play twice a year, or whoever, and get frustrated.
And it's hard because what can actually change if you want to stay? I don't think it's going to go down the Carson Palmer path, but with this day and age, and Carson Palmer was a rare situation. Stars didn't speak out and decide they want to go and create that kind of stuff back in the day. That didn't happen a lot. Nowadays, it's real easy. And one day you might wake up and be, you know what? I'm requesting a trade. I've had enough. And so that could happen at any moment. And if there's more seasons like this for Joe Burrow, maybe that does start to happen for him. But they've got to be a lot smarter about how they're building this thing in Cincinnati. And you could see it coming a mile away. That's the part where, with the Saints, with the Browns, with the Bengals, somewhat with the Jets too.
Yeah,
you see it coming a mile away.
You see it coming. I mean, there's a reason they don't win anything year after year. I mean, and they did win some because of Burrow. He's that good. Yeah. I don't think he'll take the Andrew Luck route. I think Luck is just a really unique character and well-versed in so many things in the world that football wasn't always, he didn't have to live and die football. But I don't think he'll just be like, I'm done playing, done. I'm tired of getting beat up.
Unlike Myles Garrett, Joe Burrow is the quarterback, and the Bengals have the quarterback, which is the hardest part. So the Bengals are still ahead of those other teams we mentioned because they do have the star quarterback. Now you just got to supplement him. And they've already been there too. They've gotten to the point where they were, competing.
Yeah, they've gone far.
And they can continue to do that, I think. So, yeah, I would say the big answer is no. Next, let's talk about number 1 overall pick, speaking of Joe Burrow, and also take a look at the rookie class and if it's an underwhelming class so far in 2025, plus a whole lot more on the NFL six-pack mailbag. I almost called it Peacock and Williamson. It's the
old habits, dude.
NFL six-pack mailbag next. This episode of the NFL Six Pack brought to you by Mazda. And when it comes to Mazda crafts cars that deliver confidence in every ride, because Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda has more IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else. And when you think about what goes into a vehicle, it's not that different than what goes into a finely tuned athlete, from footwork to breathwork. Athletes sweat all the details. And so does Mazda. Mazda brings that same intention to how they craft every single make and model of everything that they do. You can feel the craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to the available Napa leather upholstery. When you sit in a Mazda, it just feels better. It feels better than anything in its class. And when you drive a Mazda, especially, it feels anything but an everyday drive. Smooth handling, intuitive controls, the power, just the way it's important to them, the way their cars are crafted, the way their cars drive, and you can feel it. And I can say that as a Mazda car owner. So like the players on the field, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monarch. Monarch is really, it's important for everybody to be on top of their finances, right? And everybody knows that. You already know that. But let's be honest. Most of us can't even name our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth, between 401ks, savings, investments. It's easy to lose track. And that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, and easy to use interface on your laptop, on your phone. Organize your accounts, track spending, get a better handle on your investments without having to touch a spreadsheet. And Monarch's visual dashboards and smart tools make it so much easier to understand where your money's going and how to make it work harder for you. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Keep the mailbag going here on today's NFL Six Pack and talk number one overall picks. And what does it actually mean for success when it comes to number one overall picks, Matt? Because I think part of it is, and I think this happens a lot with the NFL draft, is it's really hard to look at a draft realistically because a lot of fans too. You think, oh, we just drafted 7 All-Pros, 7 Hall of Famers, right? You have so much, and there's so much hype, and then there's all this content that's built around each pick and how awesome it all is. And you think the top guy is going to be this good, the next guy is going to be a little bit be good, but not quite as good as that guy. Then the third guy's going to, and it just obviously doesn't happen. So Ross has a great question. What is the minimum criteria to call the number one overall pick in any draft a success? Assume Mahomes is the perfect pick. What is a realistic level you should be happy with? Example, Baker Mayfield, top 10 quarterback, gives you a chance to win each week. Is that enough to say, yeah, that's a good pick for a number one overall player?
Well, first off, I think all first overall picks are not created equal. Like Luck, Lawrence, Burrow, they were no-brainer run to the podium guys, whether they work out or not. I'm just talking about how they were perceived coming out of college, where Baker wasn't. Like, oh, I guess he'll take him first overall. But it wasn't every year he comes out, he'd be the first overall pick, like LeBron, So I think it depends what year you have. But overall, I think this is a great question. And my co-host and I for the Steelers show are planning on having a long segment about similar. Like if the Steelers end up with a 20th pick and you take that 20th pick and next year's first and a third, and you move up to go get your quarterback of the future, how good does that player have to be to make it worth it when it's all said and done? And I think a couple really interesting guys now who have a lot of their story written, but not entirely as first overall picks, are Kyler Murray and Lawrence. Like, would you do it again if you were Arizona and Jacksonville? And again, the book's not entirely written. The next couple chapters could be like Stafford, where the second half of the book is a lot better than the first half of the book. Who knows? But I think those guys probably fall right below the line. I think Baker's career is good enough. I was asked this actually with the Steelers playing Green Bay last week. Like, would you trade all those assets for Jordan Love's production? I'm like, yes. He's above the bar for me, for sure. Herbert's above the bar. I think Stroud's above the bar. I mean, we can just go quarterback by quarterback, but I think that people are getting my neighborhood. And maybe the easiest way to break it down is like Sando tiers. If I end up with a dead middle tier 2 guy, I think that's worth the first overall pick.
I think you have to realistically look about what to expect, because you're very likely not to get a good player.
Well, you're very likely to ruin one.
So like Trevor Lawrence, you might be underwhelmed by what you thought he was going to be, but he got into the second contract for the team that drafted him. That's a successful draft pick based on history. Now it might be underwhelming and not meet your criteria of what you hoped Trevor Lawrence would be, but let's just go through the last, decade or so. Cam Ward, obviously way too early there. Caleb Williams still too early, but he hasn't been there yet. Bryce Young, Trayvon Walker, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow's the only clear hit so far where it's like, yeah, okay, that was number one overall guy. Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Myles Garrett, clear hit, non-quarterback. That was a big one. That's worth number one pick all day, Myles Garrett.
Of course.
Jared Goff, Jameis Winston. There's 2 slam dunks in 10 drafts. Yeah.
Now there's another shoe here, and this is, I know we have a Wilson with the Jets question, and I'm not implying that's what happened to him because I think he's probably a failure no matter what. But when you go to these terrible organizations, which is back to like the Burrow Cincinnati conversation, did you ruin me or did I ruin you? Right. I mean, that's the problem. Like if if Mahomes would have gone to the Browns first overall, I'm sure he'd still be a good player, but I don't think he'd go to the Super Bowl every year. And if the Chiefs would have drafted Trubisky, maybe he'd be their starter still. I'm just
a little bit better. Reaching. Maybe they don't win Super Bowls, but they're good.
Right.
And he got into the second contract, with the team.
Right.
And I think Mahomes is the most fascinating because let's say the Browns drafted him. Like, what would that have ended up looking like? Like, could it be the
far from a finished product?
You're the best quarterback of your generation and you're a complete bust? I think
it could be either.
That's entirely possible. Or he could have
Yeah.
been finally the guy to elevate the Browns. But guess what?
Just like Burrow did.
Guess what? Baker Mayfield is looking pretty darn good right now in the MVP discussion, and the Browns drafted him, and they couldn't figure out with him either. So
Right. I mean, and he goes to another bad team in Carolina. I mean, it's so terrible to say, but I think there are bad organizations that just make success really difficult. And the
there are
Browns,
bad picks, and there are bad organizations, and you start to overlap those things, and you get two slam dunks in 10 years with the number 1 overall pick, and some other guys that you're okay with what the result was, but for the Browns wasn't a good pick for Baker Mayfield, even though he did become good eventually.
I mean, it'd be funny. I mean, it would be terrible for the bad teams, but if there was true lottery system where a good team ends up with it, the Eagles end up with the first overall pick, or a stable organization like Baltimore, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, the teams that never pick up there, would they turn in, would Baker Mayfield be a star right off the bat? I don't know.
More from the Locked On NFL 6-pack. I almost did it again. 6-pack of mailbag questions is here. We'll finish it up next. This episode of the NFL 6-pack is brought to you by Prize Picks. And you and I make decisions every day, Matt, right? But on Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid. So don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, the NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. And if you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play and follow along with your NFL, your NBA games, because all you do is you pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. That's it. You go to Prize Picks, they've got the projected stats for a game, and you pick 2 or more players. And if you get them right, you win. It's that easy. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can make multiple lineups. You can play as much as you want on Prize Picks, have a ton of lineups with different combinations, and Prize Picks operates anywhere, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So whether it's football Sundays, NBA tip-offs, keeps every game exciting. And you can download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Keeping the mailbag going on today's NFL 6-pack, what about the rookie class overall? We talked about number 1 picks. We talked about a former number 1 pick. Let's keep the draft mid-season conversation going. What do you think about this rookie class halfway through its first season? Go to Michael, who asked the question, is this one of the more underwhelming rookie classes at the midpoint of the season in recent memory?
I think so, but I'm not shocked by it because I wasn't blown away from the class compared to recent years overall. I mean, we knew it was not a great quarterback draft. Ward's going first overall, but he's in a terrible situation. It's not the offensive tackle or edge draft that we've seen of late, that are no-brainer type guys. I don't think it's a particularly great defensive draft overall, and I'm just pulling it up here in these early picks. A lot of people raved about, it's an awesome running back class. That hasn't quite come to fruition. Of course, there's bright. Go ahead.
Running backs have been the biggest disappointment of all because those are the players that are supposed to show up early.
And then Scatteroo just got hurt, and Judkins just got hurt. Hampton's hurt. Genty's in a terrible situation. Ugh. Now, there's definitely some bright spots. I mean, Ibuka, Tyler Warren. I mean, Tet McMillan. I mean, there's some fun dudes. Abdul Carter's flashing a lot. But I don't see – even Schlesinger just got hurt this past week. I'm just scrolling through the early picks, and I can't say that a lot of these teams are unhappy with their choice, but I don't see star power left and right.
The quarterback class is a little, obviously Cam Ward, you can't figure out what he is.
Right.
Conversations with quarterbacks going to bad teams, they're just not good enough. So who knows what Cam Ward is. The big ticket items there at the top with Travis Hunter. I hate the way they're using him, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't.
I'm expecting a post-bye breakout for him.
Here, and that's kind of where I was going, especially with wide receivers. This happens a lot. Pass rushers. There's different positions that take a little bit of time, and really for everybody, it takes a little time. These guys their heads are swimming when they get into their first rookie camp, and so this more often than not, the second half of a rookie year is the breakout time for all these players. So I think halfway through the rookie season is probably the wrong time to even check in. And it probably feels pretty underwhelming a lot of times, and especially does this year. But I think there's an opportunity for, a big second half for Travis Hunter, say. Like, let him focus on one side of the ball, for God's sake. Abdul Carter is like already breaking out, but he leads by far this class in pressures so far in his rookie season. Maybe start to see more from Mason Graham. Will Campbell got, by Myles Garrett, but he's had some really good games before that too.
I like Membo.
Yeah. And Mimbo's been awesome. Yeah. Offensive line. It was a good offensive line class. And sometimes it's a little bit harder. Like Grace Abel's had a good year. Membo's had a good year, but they're not on your fantasy team. So we're not talking about the offensive linemen. They're doing really well. We haven't seen a lot from Golden yet. Could he get bigger in the second half? Could some of the running backs start to really take off as well in the second? RJ Harvey had a really nice game last week, a big touchdown run. So yeah, let's check back in at the end of the season. A little unfair halfway through a rookie season, but so far it does feel underwhelming.
And we got to throw Jackson Dart in there. He's exciting. Yeah. We mentioned it recently. Shuck is going to take over. I don't have great hopes, but maybe. I mean, he was the third quarterback taken.
So speaking of sort of the underwhelming rookie class, is that just the theme of the whole season? Because Josh, the Jerry Rice of question askers, frequently involved in our mailbags, he says, does 2025 feel wildly inconsistent just across the league compared to other seasons?
No, because I think it's easy to forget week to week how other seasons go. I think the league wants, on any given Sunday, anyone can win. And for the most part, I think they've achieved that. But I also think we've gotten the point now, and it usually does happen around Halloween, where we have a real good feel for the terrible teams. And we've had that for a month. And now we have, and I think this past week was pretty telling too, that we have a pretty darn good feel for the true Super Bowl contender types,
I agree. And I think we kind of have had this for a while where you have that almost extended preseason feel at the early part of the season. I do think it's starting to solidify though right now. And so maybe that just kind of carried over a little bit. It has felt somewhat inconsistent for a lot of teams. There's been a lot of big injuries around the NFL as well. It's kind of started to stabilize though. Maybe it took a little longer than most years to stabilize.
Yeah. I don't know that it's a weird year. I just think sometimes we get real myopic and just remember the recent stuff.
Yeah, and it's not like the NBA where it's just like the good teams are the good teams and they're going to win.
No,
70% of their games or whatever.
Like I didn't see the Ravens season coming, but
yeah. True. Let's talk reclamation quarterbacks. This is an interesting question here. Bruce says, given the Jets' track record with quarterbacks, and again, this kind of ties in to some of our conversations earlier in this episode. With the Jets' track record with quarterbacks and getting redemptions, do you think Zach Wilson should get another honest look around the NFL? And it kind of made me think of some other quarterbacks. Like, would you take Zach Wilson or Mac Jones? Would you take Zach Wilson or Justin Fields? Would you take Zach Wilson or Anthony Richardson if you had a team and you're trying to reclaim a quarterback that had failed elsewhere?
So I didn't like Wilson coming out, and the Jets did him no favor. So he might not be the best guy to bring up for this conversation because I thought he was overdrafted from get-go. And then
weird because that was the Trevor Lawrence year, and it was so obvious Trevor Lawrence was number one, and nobody really talked about it. It's like, well, he's going one, and all of a sudden, like one day, I was like, and then Zach Wilson's of course going two. I was like, when did we get there? It was just like ordained that Zach Wilson was number two, and everyone would start talking about the number three. And that we like skipped something there with Zach Wilson, how he was just obviously the number two guy.
So I'll be honest, of the ones that look like true failures now, and I know the whole league's going to try to find the next Baker, Daniel Jones, Darnold reclamation project. The only one that I have interest in still is Richardson. And I still would have immense interest in him because maybe he can't stay healthy. Maybe he's just bad luck with health. I mean, he's big and strong and super athletic. Is he really more, quote, injury prone than anybody else? And now his stuff on the field hasn't been great either. But if I were to throw a 5th or 6th round pick at one of these teams to try to get a reclamation project, he's the only one that would interest me. You mentioned Wilson versus like Mac Jones and a couple of the other names you mentioned. I mean, he's not even close to those guys, in my opinion. If you want to compare him to Lance or Pickett.
Right. Yeah.
That's about where he's at now, like holding on for dear life.
And nobody's giving him the Daniel Jones shot to come in and compete for a starter. You're bringing him in as like the number 3, and let's see what you get.
Yeah, you have to have really good preseasons. Like you might not make the team.
But there could be more there than what we saw with the Jets, I think is a greater point, and I think that is completely accurate. I'm surprised you aren't more excited about future Steelers starting quarterback Mac Jones.
I was going to say future starter Anthony Richardson.
Future starting tight end Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. There you go.
Future starting quarterback Mac Jones. There was an interesting nugget here from Steelers Burner about, and I kind of looked at some of these things about Brian Thomas Jr., who maybe or maybe not be available.
I don't get that.
And Mac Jones, his numbers with Mac Jones are so much better than his numbers with Trevor Lawrence over a 17-game season. Over a 17-game stretch, Brian Thomas Jr.'s numbers with Mac Jones would be 102 catches, 1,295 receiving yards. And his numbers with Trevor Lawrence would be like half that.
See, I think the real way to compare that is the guy calling plays last year versus the guy calling plays this year. Mm-hmm. Last year, they had him outside the numbers, go be big, fast. And now he's like going over the middle and being more of a crafty route runner. And I just don't think that's who he is.
No, that's not at all who he is.
Which maybe that's why he could be tradable if he just isn't going to fit their system.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't fit their system. Maybe that's all there is to it, which would be a big stock up for the other conversation we had about Travis Hunter. Okay, now you're a wide receiver, and now you're a number 1. We're going to use you in all these other ways.
All the time. Right.
Because we fit. Yeah. Last one here. We're out of time, but a bonus question. Randy wants to know, number 1 draft pick Halloween candy, man.
Ooh. I'm big on Butterfingers, Baby Ruth. I'm going to show my age, but the Clark Bar Zagnut.
Oh, yeah.
Whatchamacallit.
You don't get those in your bucket anymore.
No, Clark's a Pittsburgh thing, too. You don't even see them here. Whatchamacallit I liked.
I liked Whatchamacallits back in the day. I think it's the peanut butter cup is my number.
That's pretty solid. Yeah. Last note, $100,000.
Big $100,000 guy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm going to steal my kids don't trick or treat anymore. You should steal your kids $100,000.
Yeah, my kid's 7. He's already got like some functions where he's got some we got like pre-Halloween candy already going in our house. It's pretty ridiculous. We probably got to get rid of that stuff, but
that's the problem. It's around like
forever.
It's always in my house. Like it's around forever. But then I go to the radio station. Like as soon as we're done here, I'm going to the radio station. There will be a couple sitting there, and I'll be making my coffee, and of course, I'll eat a peanut butter cup.
Right? Yeah,
because I'm looking at it. Yeah,
you roll right into overeating at Thanksgiving, and then you got Christmas, and it's just nonstop. There you go. Thanks everybody for getting involved in this week's mailbag. Always some great questions. Apologies to the ones we didn't get to. We're going to try to hit more mailbag even throughout the week on the new NFL 6-pack. So keep them coming at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or in the YouTube comments. Subscribe while you're there. And Matt and I back tomorrow with the final 6-pack of the week. We're previewing week 9 right here. Locked On NFL 6-pack.